I'm Dick Hermans, and welcome to Oblong. This being our first event in store at the beginning of our 25th year in this location. I'm not surprised that we're here 25 years later. I'm a little surprised that I'm still here. It's all good. Tonight is very special for me because I've known Judith for a pretty long time. We met, apparently, in 1981, and I was working on anti-nuclear issues involving the Con Edison's proposal for a nuclear power plant in Upper Red Hook, and working in Albany, where Judith was with a group called Environmental Advocates, and was just, as she has done her entire life, working hard to do the right thing about environmental issues and justice issues and all the things that I think good people do. And she's been such a leader in that it's just, it's wonderful to have her here in our space. She, after Environmental Advocates, after a bit of things, she was made Environmental Protection Agency Regional Commissioner, or Administrator. And following that, she now has Beyond Plastics that is working in their headquarters is at Bennington College, where she also is a professor. And but they also have a network of people around the country working on this issue, which is clearly there are a whole lot of weird, horrible issues to deal with. Plastics is one of the worst, and so we're lucky to have Judith and her team working on that. And you can learn all about it and the problem with plastic, and by what you're going to hear now from the wonderful Judith Enck.
Hello, WAMC listeners. I know who you are. I'm usually on Friday mornings, not as much as I would like, but thank you for Oblong for supporting WAMC since it was on the air, and that's why we shop here for many reasons. So, and thanks for coming out on this cold winter night. Yikes. And the goddess has cooperated. The snow did not hit today, but everyone buckle up for Sunday and Monday. So I am so happy to be here. Adam Mahoney and I wrote this book, The Problem with Plastic. Adam is a very talented journalist based in New Orleans. And what he did is make sure that we integrated the environmental justice part of the plastics issue, not just as a standalone chapter, but in every part of the book. So keep your eye on Adam Mahoney. He's incredibly talented. I want to start by just reading a paragraph from chapter 5 called Beneath the Surface. Beneath the tranquil surface of the water, a slow-moving crisis is unfolding, one that is quietly yet relentlessly shaping life on Earth. Each year, millions of tons of plastic make their way into the oceans, hitching a ride from the land through streams and rivers. This plastic doesn't disappear. Instead, it shatters into smaller and smaller pieces, weaving itself into the food chains of marine life. As the consequences of our throwaway culture become too big to ignore, we're left with a daunting question: how do we turn the tide? And that's why we wrote this book. It is chock full of information that at times can be a little discouraging, but we also include opportunities for action and working together, which is what we'll certainly talk about tonight. So there are so many different parts of the plastics issue. What really grabbed me was the fact that we're turning our ocean into a watery landfill. And I remember the moment I decided to work full-time on plastics, as Dick mentioned, after a career in the environmental community, working at NYPIRG and Environmental Advocates, and then the New York Attorney General's office, the New York Governor's office. I was privileged to be appointed EPA Regional Administrator by Barack Obama. And I really miss no drama Obama. So when you are appointed by the president to your job, they ask you to stay till the very end of the term, and I stayed till the final day. And what I didn't like about working at EPA was the endless meetings. It's just constant meetings, and I'm not a good meeting person. But at 5 o'clock, everyone would leave the building, and I would sit and I would read and I would sign letters. And I remember so clearly one night reading a scientific paper about all of the plastic in the ocean, and it just stopped me in my tracks. How is it that we are turning the ocean into a watery landfill? And why don't more people know about this? And what do we do about it? And, you know, there are a few things in my life that I remember. Oh, that's the moment I decided. But that's the moment I decided when I was leaving the EPA, I would work on plastics. I didn't know how. I didn't know where. I did need to find a job. And for some reason, no offers were coming in from fossil fuel companies. So, you know, there were a couple offers, renewable energy companies, but who wants to have weekends off and get paid a lot of money? That is like really overrated. So that is why I decided to form the organization Beyond Plastics. And it was an organizational effort to write this book. Why are we so focused on the ocean? Well, 70% of the world's surface is the ocean. And what happens is you can be walking down the street in Rhinecliff or Rhinebeck. I don't know the difference. But you could be walking down the street and a plastic on the drive down with my dear son. We was like, is it Rhinecliff? Is it Rhinebeck? Do we take the Rip Van Winkle Bridge? What do we do? It's hard traveling with me. So wherever we are, you're walking down the street in Rhinecliff, Rhinebeck, and a plastic water bottle gets away from you. It gets into a storm sewer, it rains, then it goes into the Hudson River, into the ocean. It's on the surface, so it's exposed to sunlight, gets brittle, and then the wave action is almost like a paper cutter. And one little plastic water bottle becomes hundreds or thousands of pieces of plastic. 5 millimeters or less is microplastics. Most of the plastic falls to the sea floor. It doesn't hang out on the surface. And so you have fish eating it, seabirds, sea turtles, and the plastic is building up in the marine environment at a really unsustainable pace. We estimate that there's 171 trillion pieces of plastic in the ocean that we're never going to get back. That's 33 billion each year. So it's about 2 garbage trucks of plastic are dumped into the ocean every single minute when you tally it up. So plastics is a climate change issue as well. It is Plan B for the fossil fuel industry. Who knows who the largest plastic producer is in the country today? Take a guess.
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, no, plastic manufacturer, I should say that. You know, starts with E, not A, Exxon Mobil. So here's what's happening in the fossil fuel sector. For years, fossil fuels were sold to generate electricity and to push along our cars and trucks. So what's happening in the electricity sector? We're finally moving toward renewable energy, wind, solar, geothermal, and then most important, energy conservation, energy efficiency. On the transportation side, we're moving toward electric vehicles. So ExxonMobil and little mom and pop companies like Shell and Chevron decided they're losing market share to sell their product, so they've shifted to plastic. And that is their big play. I was interested in how much greenhouse gas emissions comes from plastics when you think of the production, because it's plastics historically were made from oil and chemicals. Now it's made from 16,000 different chemicals and ethane, which is a byproduct of hydrofracking. It's a waste product of hydrofracking. So at Beyond Plastics, we did a report back in October 2022 called The New Coal, and we calculated that 232 million tons of greenhouse gases a year were emitted into the atmosphere because of plastics, which is the equivalent of 116 coal-fired power plants. So the environmental community is working really hard around the globe to shut down coal-fired power plants. We're replacing those emissions from plastics. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, we can just recycle most of the plastic. And I want to state clearly, keep recycling your paper, metal, glass, compost your yard waste and your food waste. When this little guy was just born, I was on maternity leave and started my town's recycling program. So I love recycling, but plastics recycling has been an abysmal failure. It's only 5 to 6% recycling rate. And I want to briefly explain why, because I want you to understand this and explain this to your friends and neighbors and elected officials. When you recycle an aluminum can, it's an old aluminum can into a new aluminum can. When you recycle the New York Times, you can recycle it into a cardboard box. But with plastic, there are just too many different types of plastics. They're called polymers, too many different colors, and too many different chemical combinations. So in your house, you might have a bright orange hard plastic detergent bottle over your washing machine, and then you might have a clear plastic, film plastic bread bag. Those two things cannot be recycled together. And you know who knows that? The people who make plastic. So in the book, we talk about how they spent millions of dollars on advertising campaigns trying to trick us, trying to make us think that, oh, we don't have to worry about all this single-use plastic, we can just toss it in the recycling bin, when most plastic does not get recycled. So that's not really an option. The other thing that really inspired the book was our concern for environmental justice. Most plastic production facilities are located in low-income communities and communities of color, which we refer to as environmental justice communities. Most of the manufacturing happens in Louisiana, Texas, and Appalachia. So, if you go to New Orleans ever, which is a great city to visit, you want to stay an extra day and drive up the Mississippi River. Between New Orleans and Baton Rouge is an area called Cancer Alley, because there is a concentration of petrochemical facilities, many of which make plastic. And people are getting sick in Cancer Alley because of plastic production and other petrochemical concerns. A recent study by Johns Hopkins found the cancer rate in Cancer Alley is 7 times the national average. So people's health is being dictated by their zip code, and that is just wrong. Now, unfortunately, the governor of Louisiana, Texas, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, they're not really standing up for their residents. They're not protecting their health. So it's, in some ways, up to the rest of us outside of the Gulf South to really do something. And the best thing we can do is reduce our use of plastic. And if you don't want to do it for altruistic reasons, you want to do it for your own health. I teach a class at Bennington College on plastic pollution, and we offer it on Zoom. You too can take it. It's Wednesday nights, and the next class starts February, mid-February, February in the 20s. And basically, it's a 7-week class. with Bennington College undergrads and usually about 100 community people that audit the class, which is a really fun dynamic and kind of traumatizes the undergrads who are like, who are these people? What do you mean they spend all this time working on environmental issues and they don't get paid? And I'm like, that's activism. So, and the auditors learn about pronouns. So there's a lot of back and forth with the auditors and the undergrads. And when I started teaching the class, I wanted to do a class on health. And I had lots of information on health damage where plastic is produced, but not a lot on what's it doing to you and I if we're not living near these facilities. That has now changed in the last few years. There are a number of scientific peer-reviewed studies documenting that we have microplastics in our bodies. We breathe it in and we swallow it. So if you go to the Beyond Plastics website, there's a whole section listing chronologically the studies and that have come out just in the last couple years. So here's the rundown. We have microplastics in our blood, in our kidneys, in our lungs. We have microplastics in the human placenta, both the fetal side and the maternal side. Now think about that, right? The fetus is hanging out for 7 or 8 or 9 months and already has exposure to microplastics. And then there's microplastics in breast milk. So our children are being born pre-polluted. Microplastics in testicles. I like talking about that study with legislators in Albany. They pay more attention when I talk about the testicle study, not so much on the breast milk. And the plastics industry has said, yeah, there's microplastics in your body, but you excrete most of it. Nothing, no cause and effect here. We excrete some of it, but not all of it. And just in the past year, there was a peer-reviewed study identifying microplastics in our heart arteries. It attaches to plaque. So if you've got microplastics attached to plaque, you've got an increased risk of heart attack, stroke, and premature death. And then a different study documented that microplastics cross the blood-brain barrier and contributes to Alzheimer's and neurological disease. So this is quite serious. And I think in a couple years, policymakers and regulators are going to look back and say, why didn't we do something? And here today, there is enough information to act. So what do we do? And that's why we wrote the book. We didn't write the book to depress you. It's very conversational. The book has been well received. All proceeds go to Beyond Plastics. So buy a book tonight for yourself, for your niece, for your nephew, and your public library. On a certain level, it's more important to buy it for your library. Dick, we've sold 5,200 books so far, which in the world of nonfiction environmental books, I'm told is excellent. I'm zipping around the country promoting the book. I'll be in Brooklyn tomorrow night. Last week I was in Washington, D.C. at Politics and Prose. All the book appearances is on our website. I'm going to be out in Seattle, San Francisco speaking to the Commonwealth Club, Chicago, Philadelphia, Tampa in the middle of our vacation. So I didn't want to do a book tour, but it just has started. You can get information on the book tour off our website, and we're going to circulate a sign-in sheet. You can sign up for the free Beyond Plastics email list. Please print, and if you're not already on our list, you will get emails including future book events. I'm doing Saugerties in April, and Susan Arbetter from Spectrum News is going to interview me at New York Writers Institute in April at SUNY Albany. And I mention all of this because we're not going to solve this problem all by ourselves. We cannot shop our way out of the problem. The book has some details in chapter 9 on what you can do in your own lives. It's a checklist for your kitchen. I urge you to really pay attention to your kitchen because it's your food and your beverage packaging. And I'm not into plastics shaming. None of this is our fault. I reject the notion of our plastic footprint, like our carbon footprint. This problem is brought to us by the fossil fuel industry, the chemical industry, the plastics industry, big consumer brand companies like Amazon and McDonald's that don't want to spend a few pennies more on alternatives to plastic. And we know there are alternatives, right? We don't need a big, space age breakthrough. I love mycelium packaging. I love seaweed, but we have metal, glass, paper, cardboard that can be made from recycled material and is easily recyclable. When you put it in your recycling bin, there's a good chance it actually gets recycled. So we can't shop our way out of the problem, but we can pass new laws that change the trajectory on this issue. So you're very lucky that you live in New York, where we are this close to passing the most comprehensive plastics reduction bill in the nation. It's called the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. And it requires a reduction in plastics, getting rid of the 17 most toxic chemicals in packaging, including PFAS chemicals, lead, mercury, formaldehyde. Do you know that there's lead, mercury, and formaldehyde in consumer packaging, including for food packaging? So we are working around the clock to pass this bill. It passed in the New York State Senate 2 years in a row. It came all the way to the Assembly floor, and the last night of session, the Assembly Speaker, Carl Hastie, decided not to bring it up for a vote. That's okay, they'll be back. Plastic pollution is not going away, and neither are we. So we are working really hard to pass this bill in Albany. It will be pioneering. So Reed, you're going to hand out some fact sheets for people, and they can get more information on the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. We're having a lobby day in Albany on February 9th. You're so nice and close, you can come up and join us. And I mention all of this stuff because we have to solve this problem together. Here's why there are causes for hope. And I want to direct you to chapter 8 of the book, where we profile people around the country who are working really hard against all odds to solve this problem. We will do the best we can. Don't worry if you're using plastic. The choice has been taken away from you. You go to the supermarket, you try to avoid it. You go to a food co-op, it's a little easier, especially if you buy bulk. But you don't have a lot of choice. You do what you can. And one of my favorite observations is by a woman who's known as the Zero Waste Chef. Her name is Anne-Marie Bono. And Anne-Marie says, we don't need a small number of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. And that's us, right? We're doing the best we can. You bring your reusable bag to the supermarket. You get rid of the plastic cutting board in your kitchen. By all means, throw out all of the black plastic utensils, because that's made from recycled electronic waste. Sometimes you forget your reusable coffee cup. Now that's a dilemma for me, because I drink a lot of coffee, and I get a headache if I don't drink a lot of coffee. So sometimes I walk around with a terrible headache. And you do the best we can. So causes for hope. Half of all plastic produced was since 2007. So this is contemporary. That's the year the iPhone started being sold to us. You remember 2007, right? So half of all plastic produced since 2007. So we can do something to change this. As I mentioned, the book is doing well, thanks to you. We're doing a little bit of media. I was on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman a few weeks ago, and I was with Kai Risdahl on Marketplace. and doing everything in between, Democracy Now! To Marketplace. Next month, I'm being interviewed by Gwyneth Paltrow on her podcast called Goop. Going to get a haircut. And she's a great environmentalist, along with her mom, who we love, Blythe Danner. But I really, really want to get on The Daily Show. That's my goal. And there's a correspondent, you know it's all fake, on The Daily Show named Michael Costa. And he does a lot on plastics. I just sent him the book yesterday with a really sappy inscription and begged him to have me on. So we will see how that goes. I want to close by reading the dedication of the book, and then we'll take questions. And then I'm happy to sign your book if you want me to. So here's the dedication to The Problem with Plastic, which, by the way, is published by the New Press, which is a wonderful, wonderful nonprofit progressive publishing house. By design, low-income people and communities of color bear the burden of plastics. The destructive web of plastics gathers in their neighborhoods, rivers, air, and bodies. We dedicate this book to those living in the shadow of plastics facilities in Louisiana, Texas, Appalachia, and elsewhere, in the sincere belief that they should live in a world beyond plastics, and that such a world is within our reach. Thank you for coming tonight. So I'm happy to take questions or comments, and I really like it when people disagree. So just stand up, and if you don't mind, tell us your name and your question. Yeah.
I'm Sue Mermelstein, and I'm just wondering, while we still have so many plastics to recycle, what should we do? Which ones actually get recycled? You know, and is putting all those plastics actually meaning that other things don't get recycled that should be?
Good question. So I recycle number 1 and number 2 plastics. And if you turn it over, you see a little, it's like shrinking. It's a little number inside the chasing arrow. So it's mostly soda bottles, milk jugs, detergent bottles. So I put number 1 and number 2 plastic in my recycling bin. There's growing information about concerns about plastics recycling facilities themselves, and that they're releasing a lot of microplastics. But I'm not ready to say, don't recycle number 1 and number 2. I think you should, but don't put any other recyclables in your recycling bin, because what typically happens is it'll go to a recycling facility called a material recovery facility, and they pick it off the line, and they just send it to landfill or incinerators. So I would just do number 1 and number 2. A couple years ago when I was at EPA, I toured the Ulster County Resource Recovery Authority material recovery facility, because in Ulster County, everyone's told to put all your plastics in the bin. Mm-hmm. And I asked the director at the time, where's all that going? And he said, well, we just sell it to a waste broker, and they take care of it. And I'm like, well, where does the waste broker sell it to? We don't know. Now, the problem is a lot of that plastic is exported to other countries. And there's a really good movie called The Story of Plastic, which I highly recommend, and it focuses on plastic exports and creating real problems in the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Turkey. For some reason, Turkey is importing a lot of plastics. Other questions or comments? Yeah?
Hi, Judith. I'm Aurora Stanek. I took Judith class. I really encourage everyone to take it. It is sometimes a bit depressing, but also like really enlightening. And yeah, thank you, Judith. I'm part of the Climate Smart Task Force. To be right back. And yesterday we were at we had our meeting, and people wanted to come here, but it was sold out. And so I was missioned to ask you, as a community, as a village, as a town, what would be maybe one or two first steps that we could take together to help with that problem?
Such a good question. And actually, when I was driving down today, I was thinking we need to have more detailed information on what local governments can do. So one thing is focusing on procurement, like what does the town buy and can they get rid of plastics? The other thing is I would look at the schools and see if they're using plastic in the cafeteria and try to convince them to shift to real dishes and, you know, wash it in dishwashing equipment. They're going to have to buy that. They're going to have to hire local people to do the dishwashing, which I think is a positive. But that's particularly important for children, that they're not eating off of plastic every day with plastic utensils. So I would focus on the schools. New York has a plastic bag ban, a polystyrene ban, a couple other important state laws, but you could do like little things like a local law to prohibit the intentional release of balloons. Like sometimes sporting events and car dealerships release balloons into the air, and then, you know, it comes down, and it's a real threat to fish and wildlife, and especially since you're so close to the Hudson River. But I think the thing that's going to have the greatest impact is if you could get your elected officials to help us pass the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. That's going to reduce the largest amount of packaging. And, you know, the best strategy is just not having so much to pick up. So if you order stuff online, you've all had the experience, it comes in layer after layer and layer of packaging. When this bill becomes law, it'll, you know, it'll be sent to you in one envelope rather than 4. So getting them into the political arena in Albany would be really helpful, because we need your state senator and your state assembly member to help us pass the bill. Yeah?
Judith, Steve Rosenberg. So,
With Scenic Hudson.
formerly.
Congrats.
Thank you. A lot of companies are promoting, marketing recycled apparel, mostly in the outdoor and athletic arenas. And to what extent do you see that as a positive thing to sort of increase the market for recycled? Does that then turn into increasing the market for the production of plastic itself, or is it part of the solution?
It's both of those things, but the biggest concern is if you buy clothing made from recycled plastic, eventually you're going to have to wash it. And then you get a lot of microplastics released in the wash cycle and the dryer. So I don't buy clothing made from recycled plastic. On one hand, I think it's kind of like well-intentioned, and it is a little bit of a market. You know, Patagonia is putting a lot of time and energy into researching this, but 70% of our clothing is polyester, so we're already wearing plastic. I don't think recycled plastic in clothing is really a sustainable long-term solution. And don't buy those stupid little bracelets. Remember a couple of years ago? My nieces and nephews would give me those bracelets for Christmas, and I'm like, oh, thank you, honey. And there are like 10 of them in my drawer. I mean, there are a lot of, it's really weird, there are a lot of businesses and even some nonprofits that are kind of exploiting our collective concern with plastic and not really doing much on reduction. I get calls all the time from people who have new ideas about plastics, but you know what the best thing we can do is make less. People don't want to talk about that for some reason. You know, it wasn't long ago that Coca-Cola sold most of their soda in refillable glass bottles. Yes. And it would be sanitized, it would go around, you know, dozens and dozens of times. I'm talking to wineries, they're concerned that their glass wine bottle is costing them 80 cents per bottle. They want to shift to refillable glass bottles for wine because nothing tastes good in plastic. But we need to access a commercial bottle washing facility. The closest one is in Montreal. So why doesn't the state of New York, when they give out money for economic development projects, why don't they give out money to build a commercial bottle washing operation for wine bottles and milk bottles and beer bottles? It's not rocket science. We can solve this problem as long as we focus on reduction of plastics. Yep.
Is there anybody working in the EPA who might offer some hope to you, who's actually on your side, who might be affecting any change on the national level?
The current EPA?
You have any old buddies who are hiding there?
Most of them have left. I mean, this is the most anti-environmental administration in the history of the EPA. And it's a New Yorker who's heading up the EPA, Lee Zeldin, who is the worst administrator the agency has ever had. One of the first things he did was attempt to almost entirely eliminate the largest office at EPA, which is the Office of Research and Development. So I don't think we're going to have solutions out of the EPA. You know the phrase, when the people lead, the leaders will follow? It's up to all of us. No one is going to solve it except us. And I loved working at the EPA during the Obama administration, but, you know, federal agencies are not the tip of the spear. They kind of come along when the public, you know, you think about the first Earth Day over 50 years ago. There were literally millions of people rallying in the streets. And that gave us the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the establishment of the EPA by Richard Nixon. So such a fair question and such a snotty answer from me. No, EPA is not going to help us. It's going to be everyone in this room, and I mean that really sincerely. So, you know, that's why we're trying to build a grassroots movement against plastic pollution from the bottom up. We've got local Beyond Plastics groups and affiliates. Camilla is here from Lower Westchester County Beyond Plastics. If you're with an existing group, don't start a new one, just become an affiliate with us. We have trainings 4 times a year, coming up, I think, Saturday. Like, we're doing the retail hard work to try to get people both informed and activated. Sir?
Hi, Gabriel Bono. I was wondering if you could cite some, you mentioned plastics are crossing the blood-brain barrier and causing Alzheimer's. Where could you point us in a direction to look at scientific studies on how plastics are harming our body?
Yeah, the Beyond Plastics website, beyondplastics.org. We decided to put a list of all of the peer-reviewed scientific studies. We're listing them chronologically because there's a lot of them now. And it was actually Liz recommended that we do this. So you can find the brain study, you can find the heart artery study. We need these studies to be replicated, so that's why it's so heartbreaking that the federal government is not funding environmental research much anymore. But it's very easy. I'm not being self-serving. Just go to our website, and you can see a chronological listing. We just hired a wonderful science director, so she's constantly reading the studies, making sure they're credible, and then popping them up on our website if it would be helpful. And we've got to get these studies out to doctors and nurses and medical professionals, especially cardiologists. The heart artery study really, really concerns me. The doctors that we're hearing the most from are GI docs and also doctors that deal with fertility. A very important new movie will be coming out in mid-March on plastics and fertility, which you'll be hearing about. Other questions?
Could you just elaborate
Yeah.
a little bit more on the GI piece?
It gets in your gut.
Okay.
And it's so the concern is twofold. Kind of the physicality of the plastic. So it's like a foreign object in your body, and it's tiny, right? You're breathing it in, you're swallowing it, but your GI system is not used to having little bits of plastic in it. And then here's the additional concern. Every piece of plastic has a toxic chemical in it. So then you've got the toxin in your body as well. And we are excreting some of it, but not all of it. Yep.
You talked about trying to approach local schools and other organizations that use disposable items. Given that they're probably not going to all buy dishwashers right away, what kind of materials could they be using that would be better than plastic?
You know, sturdy paper plates, but I also think that New York State has a really big budget. It's many billions of dollars. And we could go to our state senator, our state assembly member, and say, go get an appropriation for Red Hook schools to install dishwashing equipment and buy dishes. It's actually not that expensive. And there have been studies that you save money over time because you don't have to buy the single-use disposables day after day. You don't have to buy the plastic forks and the cups and the plates. So the economics really work out. There's an organization called Upstream Solutions, and also the Story of Stuff, and they've documented some of this. So it's actually a cost savings. It's just making that first expenditure. I'd really focus on schools. Yeah.
I do think students in Rhinebeck High School have been working on that, but, and I'm not on the Climate Smart Task Force, but I live in Rhinebeck, so I'm just wondering, because we have so many restaurants, it's always an issue for me. I actually like take out less because I can't stand getting the plastic. So related to the school question, I mean, what are solutions? I think a lot of the restaurant owners here would like to use something, but you know, if it's saucy, if there are health department things can't be reused. I just wonder if you or your website has ideas that locally could be brought to restaurants.
Yeah, I would talk to the restaurant owners. You know, some of them could sell, there are these little stainless steel boxes, bento boxes, kind of called tiffins. The Climate Smart folks in Ulster County have been selling them. That's what everyone in my family got for Christmas this year. Like, what is this? It's a tiffin. What's a tiffin? Then you have to remember to bring it with you. But, you know, some restaurants could offer tiffins. When I lived in Brooklyn, I would bring my Pyrex to the store, and some restaurants would just put the food right in, and some wouldn't. And it is, I guess, a violation of the health code because of cross-contamination, but I don't care. So I only went to restaurants that would let me bring my own Pyrex containers with me. But we do have to change the health code. It's a really tedious, small process. Gwyneth?
What some restaurants will do is they will plate the food for you, and then you can put it by yourself. You can put it into the container, because they don't want to have things from your house that could have cooties, basically, in the kitchen. The other thing, and this is plastic, but this is a retractable Tupperware, so I always take this to get for my takeout, although I realize the Tupperware is also plastic. And some restaurants are beginning to use, is compostable a word? Compostable containers, and those are great. You know, if we had those, no?
No.
Some of them have a plastic liner, and they have PFAS in them. So, like, if you're eating at the restaurant, just bring your own container with you, like you do. But I think the question was takeout, you know, so it's going to be delivered to your house, and that's definitely trickier. But you know who will have good ideas? The restaurant owners. And especially the ones that are into organic and farm-to-table food. I would just start, you know, find your most environmentally conscious restaurant owners and have a conversation with them about what's practical and what isn't. And I think also a lot of people would pay extra if they had the option of not getting their hot dinner in plastic. Plastic and heat together is a problem. That's when you get the chemical leaching. And never, ever, ever put plastic in the microwave. Promise me. Raise your hand if you're never going to put plastic in the microwave. I have a document for you all to sign. So, you know, you can take those steps, but let's, you know, pass laws, less plastic, less worry. Yep.
Do you work with any international partners, and what's happening out there in the bigger world?
I love working with the Center for International Environmental Law, and the executive director, Rebecca, is right here. Do you want to mention SEAL for a minute?
Sure. I just happen to live in Rhinebeck.
Couldn't you stand up?
Sorry. Hi, everyone. We are an international legal organization working to protect the environment and our climate and building international law, which, as you all know, right now is really under attack. But we partner with folks at the national level and around the world to close these loopholes for the supply chains that fossil fuel companies are trying to build through plastics. And one of our big initiatives at the moment is to try and secure an international plastics treaty that will really limit or put some parameters around and try and put in place commitments from governments to.
Is that the UN treaty?
Yes.
Yeah, which keeps. I know.
Yes, it's a long process, but the idea is really to try and build some international political will in a really tough moment to try and do that.
So that's Center for International Environmental Law, SEAL. They're your great resource for international issues. And again, that's why we're working to build the movement from the bottom up, because when we send the United States delegation to international treaties, they need to be taking a good position. Right now, the current administration is just pulled out of all international negotiations. We're going to, on the environment, we're going to take one, I think on more than just the environment, we're going to take one or two more questions, but in the meantime, we're going to share with you this nice little brochure about Beyond Plastics with a very subtle QR code on the back. You have a birthday coming up. You don't want stuff. You want to tell your kids to make a donation to Beyond Plastics in your name. So we'll pass these out. Any other questions? Anyone? Sir.
Hey, Jim
Hi.
Donnelly. I live in Stanfordville, little on the end of a dead-end road. My neighbor lets me use his garbage can, and he's got also the red top for recyclables. Welsh, yeah, it's a company. And about a year ago, I like watching garbage trucks. I always have since I was a little kid. The truck comes up, and he scoops up. They don't have to get out anymore. Scoops up the garbage, and then goes to recyclables, scoops it up. It goes in the same bin.
Maybe not. So let me explain this. I also love watching garbage trucks. Most of them have a divider.
That's what I called the company, and they said, but they now send two separate trucks.
Oh, so they didn't have the divider. All right, so I'm glad you called. A lot of waste haulers will send one truck, and part of the back of the truck is for your stinky garbage, and the other half is for your recyclables. But you caught them violating the law, so I'm glad you called. And you can also call the Department of Environmental Conservation and talk to them to make sure that, New York has mandatory recycling, so we have to make sure all the waste haulers are complying. Yep.
I could be imagining this, but is there some marine animal that they discovered that might be able to eat the microplastics and neutralize them or repurpose them or something? Have you heard anything like that at all? Some treatment?
Well, about every month or so, there's a news report about some new bacteria that eats up plastic. And it might work in the laboratory, but it doesn't work in the real world. It doesn't work in the marine environment. It doesn't work with litter on the streets. So again, work with me. We have to make less plastic, where there's nothing that's going to gobble it up. I remember speaking to some high school students, and a bunch of the male high school students insisted that we could just send all of the solid waste into space. And that was a really good conversation.
The New York State legislator once.
Oh, a New York State legislator once said that. Good. You want to name names? No, good. Hopefully they're not in office anymore. All right, you've been a wonderful audience.